everyone, AMR back again with another video. So in today's episode, I'm going to be recapping all of the football that was played. So from Thursday to the Sunday games, as well as Monday Night Football that literally just got over at the time of filming this. So sit back, relax. It's going to be a little bit of a longer episode, but as always, I hope you enjoy it. And if you do, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. For our first game up here, we have the Thursday Night Football game where the Bills defeated the Rams at 31-10. Biggest call out here is that Josh Allen looked amazing. He just needs to be a little more cautious when he is running with the football. I think Chris Collinsworth kind of called it out during the broadcast, but they were playing with a lead the majority of this game. And so whenever you see a quarterback later in the game get a little too aggressive with his legs, that's where you really start to bleed into possibly getting injured at some point in the season. So something to monitor. Be careful. You don't want to see a guy like that. He is literally the heartbeat of this team. And so that brings me to my next point here. You have Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis. I think that they are right at home. I think that they combined for over 180-ish yards. So they actually combined for probably close to 200 yards in that game. And they both scored. So I think that Gabriel Davis might be the best number 2 wide receiver in any offense in the entire country. He is absolutely phenomenal, exactly where he left off last season. Stephon Diggs, even though he had Jalen Ramsey on him the entire game, he looked phenomenal as well. You basically are getting back that draft capital that you invested in him. What I don't really understand is why Devin Singletary got taken out of the game or was not being utilized as much. He was averaging 6 yards a carry. And then they just started force-feeding Zach Moss. It didn't really make any sense, and Zach Moss wasn't really doing anything with the football. So it was probably game script dependent. The game really never felt at risk of losing, and I think that that's why they were kind of letting Devin Singletary take a backseat for the remainder of the game. Now let's flip over to the other side of the ball where you got Matthew Stafford, who, I'm going to be honest, a lot of people are being a little too critical on the guy. He actually looked pretty good. So I know that he has the offseason thing where he was dealing with an elbow injury, and then he came out and said that he had a surgery on the shoulder or the elbow, and then he also had a shot of cortisone. So I was really looking to see if he had lost any velocity on that arm, and I didn't see it. He was hitting the targets, or he was hitting his receivers in the hands. Sometimes the ball is a little bit too high, but for the most part, he was doing everything that he should be doing. But the biggest problem is that he had pressure in his face almost instantly. The Bills defense was flying all over the field, and they sacked him 7 times. I mean, what do you want from the guy? So I think that the bigger issue here is the Rams offensive line, or maybe it's just that the Rams defense is just that challenging. Don't really know yet. It's only one game. Don't read too much into it. But going ahead and switching over to the receivers here, you got Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson. Cooper Kupp, it's exactly what you want in the guy. The guy's unreal. He caught 10 receptions on 13 targets. He had 128 yards and a touchdown. He's a beast. He's a monster. He's exactly what you want. And that's good to see that even after, him getting yet another year older, that he hasn't lost a step. Now, Allen Robinson, on the other hand, I am a Bears fan. And so I'm going to be a little biased whenever I see Allen Robinson because of the lack of effort that he showed while in Chicago. Now, Allen Robinson looked exactly the same as what he did in Chicago. A very lazy route runner. He wasn't going up for the ball, trying to come down with it. He just looked like a guy who got paid and now he just doesn't want to get hurt on the field. It's kind of sad to see, honestly. And then flipping over to the running back side, Cam Akers only had 3 carries in the game. He did literally nothing with them. He had 0 yards. But that's kind of what you're going to expect when you got a guy who is coming back from an injury. So I don't really know what you want. Don't read too much into it. It really is just one game. Dale Henderson, he looked like the workhorse, but I really don't expect that to be a season-long thing. He wasn't super efficient when he did have those carries. But again, the Rams were behind the entire game, so it was very probably just game script dependent, and that's why they started utilizing the passing plays. Quick call out also is that Tyler Higbee was targeted 11 times. That's their tight end. He came back from injury as well. So I think that Stafford's going to continue to move the ball around. Better days are ahead. No need to panic yet. Okay, so for our next game here, we have the Eagles at the Lions. The Eagles went ahead and defeated the Lions 38-35. This is one of those games that I kind of was keeping an eye on when I was watching NFL Red Zone throughout the entire weekend. I was really expecting a lot from the Eagles. The one thing I wasn't expecting was the amount of offense that the Detroit Lions were able to put up. So I was very surprised, honestly, for a good thing. I really did like what I saw out of the Lions. It was good to see Aiden Hutchinson applying that pressure. And honestly, the game was actually a really fun one to watch if you did get a chance to. So let's take a look at the Eagles here. So you got Jalen Hurts. He was inaccurate. He was like 18 for 32, but if he was very efficient, he had 243 yards on those completions. More work was done on the ground, though. He was 17 for 90 and 1. He was so close to getting a huge day. Like most of the time, he would be passing the ball, and then the guy would get down on like the 3-yard line or like the 4-yard line, and then they would just run it in. I think 3 different running backs had a rushing touchdown. So Jalen Hurts was just inches away, literally yards away from having a monster game. I think the bright days are very much in the near future. Looking over at the Miles Sanders, again, I mentioned it earlier, but he was efficient on the ground, 13 for 96, averaged 7.4 a carry and a touchdown. The one thing I will call out is that Miles Sanders is going to miss time throughout the season. We already know that. We have enough data now where it's like 2 or 3 seasons, and he just gets injured. He gets banged up. He's one of those backs, but when he is in, you go ahead and play him. He's a very athletic back who can do a lot with the football. Definitely a playmaker, fun to watch, but be cautious. Understand that he is one of those guys who's going to get banged up throughout the season. A.J. Brown, man, that guy is fun to watch, but it was a little disheartening because he had such a monster day, but it really didn't amount to as big of a day as what it looked like when you watched the game. When you were watching the game, you're like, holy cow, this guy is just dominating. The problem is he didn't get in the end zone. So I think he finished I'm looking over here at my stats. He finished with 10 receptions for 155 yards, but did fail to score. This looks like it's Jalen Hurts' one and only read. Jalen Hurts had 243 yards and 155 of them were to A.J. Brown. I think it goes without saying, but A.J. Brown is going to be very involved in this offense, so much so that Devonta Smith wasn't even able to record a reception on the day. So that's a huge alarming thing for Devonta Smith owners. I would definitely not hit the alarm button just quite yet. Could have been matchup, could have been a lot of things. But it is definitely something to monitor because Devonta Smith, he is a very talented wide receiver. I don't really know why he wouldn't have been targeted or caught a reception or whatever. I know that he did have a wide open one that he did drop. So there are those little things, but it has been known that in the offseason, A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts were very chummy with one another and that they were being like kind of friends. So just something to watch out for. And then on the Lions side, you have Jared Goff. He's really nothing special. But that being said, he did manage to score 2 touchdowns and only throw 1 pick against Philadelphia. Unfortunately, that 1 pick did result in a pick 6. So I don't really know how much you can hold against him. It was kind of a longer return as well. It wasn't like one that was 10-yard return. It seemed like it was closer to like a 30-yard return. DeAndre Swift had an insane game. I think on like the second snap of the game for their offense, he broke off like a 60-yard run. Absolutely phenomenal. He did kind of cool off there. So he ended with a stat line of like 15, 144, and 1. It was nice to see him get in the end zone and surpass 100 yards in his first game. The guy was electric, but if you negate that 60-yard run at the beginning, you have 14 for about 80 yards. So a very similar stat line to the Miles Sanders is what I talked about earlier. So I think that DeAndre Swift kind of brings that extra element that maybe Miles Sanders doesn't, and that he's capable of just being super shifty, getting involved in the passing game, and that's really where these backs are going to get most of their value. Looking over here at DJ Chark, he was 4 for 52 and 1. Anytime that you see a guy get acquired in the offseason and then have an immediate impact, it's a very, very good sign. That being said, it was the Amon-Ra St. Brown show. He had 8 receptions for 64 and 1. I don't think that this game is as good or as sexy on paper as what it was in person. Amon-Ra St. Brown is getting hyper targeted. He is going to be hauling in a ton of those passes, and he's going to be a guy that you're going to want to start every single week. So that leads us to our last guy that I'll talk about on this team, and that is TJ Hawkinson. He was 4 for 38, but he failed to score. I think that if he did find the end zone, then it would have been a very good game. Kind of a down week for all tight ends across the league if your name wasn't Travis Kelce. So I really don't see this as too much of a red flag. It wasn't like all the other tight ends were doing well and he just kind of sucked. It's week 1. Don't read too much into it. But biggest takeaway here is that the Detroit Lions kind of look legit. They were able to hang with a team that is predicted to just completely blow them out. Their defense looked actually all right. Granted that, the AJ Brown pretty much went and dismantled the defender that was guarding him the whole game. It still was nice to see that the Detroit Lions didn't give up throughout any point in that game. It kind of made it a fun game to watch as well. So switching over to our next game here, we have the 49ers at the Chicago Bears. So the Chicago Bears were actually able to defeat the 49ers 19-10 to the world's surprise as well as mine. Now, before we go ahead and get too far down into this analysis of the 49ers Bears game, it is worth noting that they were playing in an absolute monsoon. It was a flash flood warning. There was visible standing water on the field. The Bears actually have real grass, which was, planned to be in the off season. So that is not going to be as forgiving as much as like a turf would be. And so it was a very scary game to be playing in. Elijah Mitchell ended up getting hurt because of it, I believe. And a lot of the people were very, very ineffective in this game. And it kind of was a bummer. I was really excited to see the whole Trey Lance versus Justin Fields, but we kind of got robbed of that due to the weather. It's going to happen. It's Chicago. They're right by the lake, whatever. So let's start off on the 49ers here. So you have Trey Lance, who dealt with weather conditions, managed to throw under 50% passing completion, had 0 touchdowns and had 1 interception. I think that Jalen Johnson said that he didn't do shit as his comment in the post game. So he was talking about what Trey Lance did for them. And he was also pretty ineffective on the ground as well. Only averaging 4.2 a carry for a quarterback is pretty bad. He did have 13 attempts and surpassed 50 yards. But as a quarterback, typically they get, 10 to 12 yards per carry just because a lot of the defenders are downfield. They're not really spying on the quarterback all that much. So for him to be that ineffective on the ground as well, I think it could have just been very much due to weather and he was afraid to juke left and right, wasn't as shifty. So flipping over here to the Elijah Mitchell story. Elijah Mitchell was actually doing pretty good. He was 6 for 41, but then he got hurt and it really doesn't look all that good. He has he had a visible cast or brace on his knee. San Francisco has a track record of running backs who just get injured for a very long time. It happened last season in game 1 with Raheem Mostert. It's a known thing in the San Francisco backfield. And I think that's why they have so much depth at the position. The only problem is I thought that Elijah Mitchell would be their best chance at a success story out of the backfield. So it's going to be interesting to see how they move forward with that. And as more details come out, I'll be sure to let the channel know, as well as I know. If you don't, I have a Twitter and I try to keep that as up to date as possible as well. George Kittle, he did not play due to a groin injury. So that really sucks. I mean, you have the entire offseason and you have a guy who is projected to be a top 3 tight end, and he's not even suiting up for week 1 because of a groin injury that he sustained in practice. So I'm not going to go ahead and say call the alarm just yet, but he is starting to get the nickname George Brittle. So just keep an eye on it. It's tough, man. It's a tight end, and they're going to get banged up, but George Kittle has definitely had his fair share of injuries often. So just be careful. Brandon Ayuk, 2 for 40. I think it was likely a product of bad weather. You didn't have George Kittle out there. And so I would have thought that Ayuk could have been more involved. But the fact that it was just so rainy and whatnot, Trey Lance didn't have a good game to begin with. So I think this was definitely a causation of Trey Lance and the weather conditions that they were having. It wasn't really a Brandon Ayuk route running or anything like that. Deebo Samuel, he was 2 for 14 through the air. I mean, at what point are we just going to go ahead and acknowledge that he's more of a running back than a wide receiver? So on the ground, he was 8 for 52 and 1. And I really don't see a problem with it. He seems to be hyper effective when he does go in the backfield. And he's also very effective when he is out there running routes. So as long as San Francisco is fine with what type of player that they're like signing up for, and they're going to have to pay a lot of money to him soon. So I'll be interested to see how that develops. Justin Fields was 8 for 17, 121 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. He was very, very ineffective on the ground. He was averaging 2.5 a carry. Again, I'm just going to keep beating the dead horse here, but the weather was just so bad. Dave Montgomery, he had probably one of his worst games he's ever had, averaging 1.5 per carry, 3 for 24 through the air. It just didn't feel like a good game to be watching. I'm a Bears fan, and that was probably the only reason I was keeping an eye on it. Otherwise, I probably just would have had it like off to the side and not really looked at nothing but the box score at the end of the game. Darnell Mooney, 1 for 8. It's really not a good look. I think that there was a couple balls that he definitely should have been able to haul in, but for the most part, wet conditions, and it was just too hard. Cole Kmet with the no receptions there's better days ahead. Trust me on that one. Cole Kmet has way too much talent, and I really do think that the Chicago Bears are going to get that squared away very, very soon. So they're going against Green Bay next week. I have a feeling that they're probably going to get beat. Green Bay is a really good team, and they are coming off a pretty bad loss, which we'll talk about here soon. So go ahead and start up your Chicago Bears in that game as long as the weather does go ahead and play. I have no reason to believe that Dave Montgomery, Darnell Mooney, Justin Fields, Cole Kmet, or anyone on the San Francisco side are going to have these continued things that they're going to struggle with. So go ahead and just make sure that you keep on keeping on, and we'll be just fine. So for our next game here, we have the Steelers at Bengals. The Steelers were able to squeak out a win that surprised a lot of people, including myself. If you did end up catching the episode that I dropped, I think on Sunday morning, I thought that this game was going to be a very lopsided Bengals win. I didn't think that the Steelers were going to be able to keep up with what the Bengals were going to bring. And man, Trubisky didn't look as bad as what I had expected, or hoped anyway. Trubisky was actually Trubisky was good for Trubisky. I don't think that he'd be good for most franchises, but he played way better than I had expected. Najee Harris, 10 for 23, ineffective, 2.3 a carry, 2-3 and 1 through the air. He did get hurt in the game, so it's something to keep an eye on. It doesn't sound like it's too serious, but again, he is a premier back, so you probably had to draft him pretty high. Something to keep an eye on. George Pickens, the big rookie wide receiver in the offseason, only had 1 for 3. Pat Freiermuth was kind of the star of the show with 5 for 75. He led the team in receiving, and Pat Freiermuth looks like the real deal. I think that he's going to be a tight end that we're going to talk about for a very long time on the channel. He has a rookie quarterback in Kenny Pickett behind Mitch Trubisky, so I think that having young quarterbacks, they like to use the tight end as much as possible as that safety net for the guaranteed yards, and I really think that Freiermuth is a very good person to fit that role. Deontay Johnson, 7 for 55. He looked great. He looks very athletic. He had one catch that was absolutely unreal, and he's kind of nursing like an AC joint thing in his shoulder. So I was surprised to see him be as athletic as he was, given that he's nursing something in his shoulder. If you're a receiver, you really don't want to have anything wrong with your shoulders, elbows, or hands. And if you're dealing with an AC joint, that's probably one of the more severe ones outside of maybe a broken finger. So keep an eye on it, but he looked fantastic. I really don't have any worries about him. Joe Burrow, man, at least he finished strong, because in the beginning of the game, he was scaring a lot of fantasy owners. He started out absolutely horrible. He finished with 4 interceptions. He had a fumble. He did end up throwing for 2 touchdowns. He was 33 for 53 on pass attempts to completions, 338, and he did go for 47 yards on the ground. Joe Burrow really kind of kicked it into high gear and almost was able to come back in this game. So you got to give credit where credit's due, but man, oh man, I think the nerves were just getting to him. He really wanted to start off and prove that last year losing in the Super Bowl was the thing that they needed to propel them, and this is not the way you want to start off the next year. Joe Mixon, he was 27 for 82 for 3 a carry. I mean, I was watching the game, and I think that this was just a product of how hype the Steelers defense was. The Steelers defense actually did take one of those interceptions to the house, so they were pretty juiced the entire game, and I think that they just had the Bengals numbers in this matchup. Joe Mixon he didn't have any holes to run through, really, and he wasn't being really utilized through the air too often. It just looked like a very surprising one-off game that you're going to think back when the Bengals are 8-2 later on in the season, and you go, I don't know what happened there. So nothing to worry about. Keep an eye on it and make sure that they get back to their normal form. But one game is not enough of a sample size to create any type of reasonable projections on the season. So the recent acquisition in the offseason, Hayden Hurst, it was nice to see him get involved in his first game as a Bengal. He had 5 receptions for 46 through the air. Looked great. I think that he is a really good fit for the offense, especially losing out Uzama, who was very integrated into the Bengals offense when he was there. T. Higgins, 2 for 27 before his concussion. Now, it did look pretty bad. He looked pretty banged up, and so he may end up missing a game or two, but it's a concussion. They're typically just like one-off things that they will bounce back from. Give him time. He's super talented. I think that taking a more cautious route in this role would definitely suit him better longevity-wise. And in the meantime, Jamar Chase owners, just go ahead and just hammer down on Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase had an absolutely phenomenal game as well. I don't really even have the numbers in front of me because it's just Jamar Chase. You get what you expect when you play him. He ended up scoring in the game. Looked great in the absence of Higgins as well. And speaking of players that stepped up in the absence of Higgins, you got Tyler Boyd, who ended up getting 4 receptions, 33 and 1. He looked very, very good. He looked quick. He's definitely that slot guy. So he was catching a lot of balls on the run. So he was able to just kind of squeeze into the end zone and finish really strong. So last second thoughts here. Steelers defense looks a lot tougher than what you might imagine. And keep an eye on Najee Harris's injury as well as T. Higgins' progression. So next up here, you have the Patriots at the Dolphins. So the Patriots ended up losing this one 7-20. Mac Jones had gotten knocked out of the game, but he already at that point went for 30 pass attempts. He was 21 for 30, so he's very efficient, but he barely passed 200 yards. He had 1 touchdown, 1 interception, and he kind of got sandwiched a little bit, and it looked like he might have fractured his back. I don't think that the x-rays or MRIs or anything have indicated that there is any type of a fracture going on there, but he did say that he's probably going to miss 2 games at the minimum. So be careful because if you're a pass catcher in New England, I think it's time to sound the alarm because they really did not figure anything out outside of Jacoby Myers. Jacoby Myers looks really good, but Ramondre Stevenson was 8 for 25. He only had two catches and 2 yards through the air. So I think that the guy you're going to want to hyper target as much as you can is going to be the Damian Harris, especially if they can't get any type of progress going through the air. You got to double down on that running game. So Damian Harris was 9 for 48, averaging 5.3 a carry. Devontae Parker was very unimpressive in his debut. Hunter Henry, 2 for 20. Like I had mentioned earlier, it wasn't a really great day for tight ends, so don't read too much into it. I think the bigger concern here is the quarterback situation, and that could be a bigger indication as to whether or not Hunter Henry has a good or a bad season. So Tua Tagovailoa went for 270 yards, 1 touchdown on 33 attempts. He looks pretty comfortable. It was one of those games where it seemed like Miami kind of had it under control, even though the scoreline, is pretty close. It didn't seem like New England was going to be able to hold their own in this game. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are so fast. There's going to be a lot of tired defenses trying to chase both of those guys around. Jalen Waddle caught this one slant route across the middle where he just took off for the touchdown. He finished with 469 and 1, looks super fast, and he's going to be an absolute phenomenal complement to Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill in his debut game was 8 for 94. All questions and concerns were completely answered for Miami, and he had probably one of the craziest catches I've seen in the last year or so. He went up for the ball, and then the defender for New England looked like he was going to intercept it, and Tyreek Hill just took it out of his hands. It was actually kind of funny to watch. Chase Edmonds, 12 for 25, 4 for 40 through the air. Not a bad showing for a guy who was listed as questionable with a groin injury all the way up until I think it was Sunday morning. So I think that Jalen Waddle is going to be I really do think that Chase Edmonds is going to be one of those guys that comes through for you in a big way. Now, on the other side, I really don't think Mike Gesicki is going to be coming in. He looks to be utilized more as a pass blocker, which is a significantly different role than what we have seen in the past. And I think that Gesicki owners are going to be needing to kind of sound the alarm. The head coaching staff has said in the media that they're looking to utilize him more as a blocker rather than a pass catcher. So Gesicki's probably going to get a little frustrated here because he was very big in whether or not that the Dolphins had a good or a bad game last season. So going to be a big adjustment in a period. But that being said, the Dolphins did come away with a victory. All right, so here we are with the Browns and Panthers. This was a highly anticipated game, and the Browns came out victorious on a field goal that ended in regulation. So Jacoby Brissett barely over 50% passing completion percentage. He had one touchdown for 147 yards. He just looked like Jacoby Brissett, really nothing special whatsoever. Nick Chubb was 22 for 141. He didn't score, but man, when he did have the ball, he looked like he had that burst, like he had that speed. I was very impressed with him. I would have liked to see him get in the end zone, but that being said, his compliment back of Kareem Hunt, 11 for 46 and 1 on the ground, 4 for 24 and 1 through the air. That's just vulturing touchdowns out of Nick Chubb. I really think that the two are going to have big boom games, and sometimes they might even have boom games in the same game. It just so happened to work out that Kareem Hunt's boom came from the touchdowns and Nick Chubb came from the actual efficiency. Now, Amari Cooper, 3 for 17. That's pretty tough as a guy who got signed in the offseason. He's supposed to be their wide receiver 1, but you got Jacoby Brissett passing to him at least for the first half of the season until Deshaun Watson joins the team. But Deshaun Watson didn't even look that great in the offseason. So temper expectations hard on Amari Cooper. David Njoku, 1 for 7. Absolutely disgusting. I'm not going to hit the panic button just quite yet because I think he's super athletic and the team will definitely utilize him moving forward. But that being said, he should be utilized way more in their offense. It's kind of putrid. Down week for tight ends. I got to keep reminding myself that, and just live to forget that one. Baker Mayfield, 235 and 1. It's not terrible, but it was a very slow, grueling game if you were watching it. It didn't feel good at all. This kind of like had a big buildup of the return of Baker and the return of Baker Mayfield facing off against Cleveland Browns and how there was a big quarterback like fight for the job kind of thing. And then they come out and they just kind of look flat. It didn't feel good. Christian McCaffrey was 10 for 33 and 1 on the ground, 4 for 24 through the air. This is a really bad sign for McCaffrey owners, at least through one game. Christian McCaffrey should have been hyper utilized in this game, and he just really wasn't. I don't know if that is a product of Baker Mayfield, a product of Rule, or what have you. It just was not a good sign. So keep an eye on it. I think that it will get better with time as McCaffrey and Baker Mayfield build that rapport, but for the time being, it doesn't look that great. Robbie Anderson, big day, 5 for 102 and 1. I don't think you want to read too much into it. I think that he just kind of caught a really long pass, and then he was really good when he did have the ball in space, but I don't think that this is going to be a weekly occurrence. He had 20.4 yards per reception in this game. It's just not sustainable throughout the year. If it is, go get him because he's probably pretty cheap. DJ Moore, 3 for 43, looked really good when targeted, but problem is that he wasn't able to get in the end zone. He wasn't getting a ton of targets, especially wasn't getting a lot of receptions. For a guy who is as talented as DJ Moore, you would have liked to see more in the game. Next up here, you have the Colts at Texans, 20-20. Matt Ryan looked very, very good. He had 352 yards in his debut, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Tough way to start the season as a team and a guy who is known as like this legendary quarterback out of Atlanta. And so you really would have expected a little bit more, especially you would have thought that they would have blown out the Texans. But it's the first game of the season. You don't know what to expect here. Jonathan Taylor was unreal. Dude is absolutely insane. He was averaging 5.2 a carry, 161 yards on 31 attempts. It just seems like Frank Reich is going to absolutely 100% commit to the running game, and that's a good thing for Taylor owners here. It's one thing that you can go ahead and just try and be a running team and it just doesn't work out, but Indianapolis has the right pieces in place. They have a good offensive line with putting Nelson there. I think that this team could really, really excel if they commit to the run the way that Tennessee does with Derrick Henry, and the fact that he had 31 attempts in this game is a step in the right direction. So more to come on that, but I mean, if you drafted Jonathan Taylor, you know what you're getting with this guy. Michael Pittman Jr., 5 for 121 and 1. I'm really happy that he was able to have the game that he had, given all the hype in the offseason about him. I would have liked to see more receptions because 5 for 121 looks more of like an outlier game for me. I would have rather had that say like 8 for 121. But again, first game. Nyheim Hines did have 9 receptions out of the backfield. I think that was more indicative maybe of a game script and that he just got a lot of checkdowns. So I don't know. Keep an eye on it. Davis Mills, 240 and 2 looked really, really good, especially considering the defense he was up against. Davis Mills had a better than expected year last year, and I really don't think that he's all that bad of a quarterback. People think that he's on the Texans and that you can automatically write him off. There's a couple of games last year where he led the league in passing, not fantasy points, but just passing. So he's very efficient when he does have the ball. So keep an eye on him. I think that he is going to be one of those sneaky guys that you can stream in a lot of your leagues. Damian Pierce, 11 for 33 against a hard defense. Not a great start to a career, but one you can build off of. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump over to the Rex Burkhead, 14 for 40. Now, this is the bigger problem. It seems like Rex Burkhead is the lead back on this team. So we don't really know how long it's going to take for the old guy to get out of that and let the new hotness come in of Damian Pierce. So be patient with that. Rex Burkhead has been known to vulture touchdowns. So you're going to be frustrated for the time being, but Damian Pierce is definitely the right guy to have for the long haul. Braden Cooks, 7 for 82. I mean, there's nothing new there. Braden Cooks, when he does get the ball, he's a playmaker. He's very, very fast, and he's got great hands. So as long as they're targeting him, I really don't see a problem. I would be concerned if he starts to get like a 3 reception or a 4 reception game. He's known for being like that PPR guy with right around 80 to 120 yards receiving. O.J. Howard, very much an outlier game. 2 receptions, 38 yards, 2 touchdowns. It's fantastic that he was able to get signed after being dropped, and then he was immediately had an impact in the game. The problem is he only played 17 snaps percentage. So it's one of those games that you're going to look back later on in the season. You're just going to go, remember when O.J. Howard had those 2 touchdowns? Like, that's insane. Next up, you have the Saints at the Falcons. Saints went ahead and defeated the Falcons 27-26 in a game that was honestly pretty ugly. The Falcons have such a hard time, man. They're like, I saw some stat where like, when teams are leading 15 plus, the Falcons are 5-3-1 in like the last, I want to say 5 years or something like that. And the rest of the league has like 145-2. It's a tough time to be a Falcons fan. They just can't close out games. All things being considered, though, Jameis Winston looked mobile. He looked efficient in his return from his injury. 269 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. That's a step in the right direction for sure. He looked very, very consistent. Looked good. Alvin Kamara, awful. So that is that's something that is like vastly different than what you may have wanted. So Alvin Kamara is going to be one of those guys that he's definitely going to have good games, right? But this was not it. He only had 9 carries for 39 yards and was pretty inexcusable for a guy of his caliber. This is a guy that you likely took at the end of the first, maybe in the start of the second, if you were lucky enough. And so Alvin Kamara should be one of those guys that has better days ahead of him, but just, I don't know. I'm kind of torn on the idea of it. Michael Thomas, 5 for 57 and 2. It's very optimistic to see him score in his return, but he will not be utilized the same way that he was when Drew Brees was his quarterback. It's just not going to happen. Jameis Winston's good. He's a former number 1 overall pick, if you can remember that and believe that. But he's just not Drew Brees. So temper your expectations. It'd be interesting to see how he's utilized. It seemed like Jarvis Landry had the majority of the yardage through the air, surpassing 100 yards. He looked very, very good. Chris Olave, for being a rookie, was 3 for 41. That's a very, very good game. It's a great start to a career. It's something you can build off of, and I think that he'll end up being better than Jarvis Landry as the season progresses. Marcus Mariota was 20 for 33, 215. He was extremely effective on the ground, though. He was 12 for 72 and 1. He's going to be one of those guys like a Jalen Hurts-esque. He's kind of always been that role, even when he was in Tennessee, when he went to Oakland, that transferred into Vegas, and now that he's on the Atlanta Falcons, I see it being nothing different. And I kind of like the way that the Falcons were playing until they lost it all. Cordell Patterson, 22 for 120 and 1. The dude looks really good. I like Cordell Patterson in a lot of the best ball leagues that I'm in. I drafted him because I know that when he does boom, he has phenomenal weeks, and he's really not going to cost you a lot to go ahead and go grab. Drake London, 5 for 74. It's definitely the best rookie performance on the day, especially being a wide receiver and you're being thrown passes by Marcus Mariota. Very optimistic. I think that the options are definitely in his favor. He's the lead wide receiver outside of Kyle Pitts. So future's very bright. It seems like Marcus Mariota can rely on him. Kyle Pitts, unfortunately, was 2 for 19. He's going to let you down in week 1, but believe me, he is a playmaker and he'll do what he needs to in the coming weeks. So next up, you have the Ravens at the Jets. So the Ravens defeated the Jets 24-9. This was a game that kind of just seemed out of hand early, and then the Jets made it look close at the last second. Lamar Jackson barely surpassed 200 yards passing. He did have 3 touchdowns, though, and a pick. He was kind of ineffective on the ground, which is something that you don't really say too much about Lamar. 6 for 17. J.K. Dobbins did not play, but I think that that's kind of the team's been trying to relate to the media. This is the approach they're going to take. They're going to try and nurse him back to health because they believe in the talent. They've been signing one-off year guys to go ahead and fulfill that running back role in the absence of J.K. Dobbins, because they really do believe in J.K. Dobbins, and so they're going to do everything they can to make sure he gets back right. Devin Duvernay, this is one of those games that you kind of want to monitor because he was 4 for 54 and 2. It's probably a one-off game, but we really don't know because there's no options there. Mark Andrews had kind of a quiet day for 5 for 52. Typically, he's right around 8 or 9 receptions for close to 100 receiving yards. So I think that when the games are closer knit and the Ravens are trying to push down the field more, Mark Andrews will have better days ahead. Rashad Bateman, 2 for 59 and 1. It really wasn't that great of a performance for Rashad Bateman because he got the majority of those yards on 1 reception, which that 1 reception also was the one where he scored. So keep that in mind. I really want to see how this game script starts to switch when they start playing tougher opponents. Joe Flacco, if you had to stream a quarterback in your DFS lineups or whatever, and you're looking for a cheap guy, Joe Flacco was your guy this week. 307 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He cost you literally nothing to go ahead and go for it. Would have liked to see more touchdowns. I think that'll come with time. And it seems like he's going to be the quarterback for the next 3 to 4 weeks with Zach Wilson remaining out. Michael Carter had a very big start to the day. It was kind of shaping up to be one of those, what did I miss in my research kind of things. And then he just fizzled out. He really was effective through the air as well. 7 for 40. I think that the game script kind of got flipped a little bit and that they tried to pass the ball more given that they were down. That could be something that is a repeating occurrence throughout the season. Breece Hall, 6 for 23, ineffective on the ground, 6 for 38 through the air. He's a rookie. I don't think that they're trying to rely on him too much, but would have liked to see a little bit more yards per catch or in yards per attempt. Elijah Moore, 5 for 49. I think that he gets a lot of his value when he gets more targets. So as long as you're getting more targets to Elijah Moore, he'll have a better game. Joe Flacco will build that rapport. He was really just kind of passing the ball around to a lot of different people, for crying out loud. He had 307 yards passing, and his number 1 and number 2 wide receiver totaled about 120 yards. So he was moving the ball around quite a bit. Corey Davis, 6 for 77. He's definitely the number 1 wide receiver on the team, and I really don't know why. I think that they have a better talent with Elijah Moore. So keep that in mind. Game was really out of hand early, so it is what it is. Next game here, we have the Jaguars at the Commanders. Jaguars lost 22-28. Trevor Lawrence, 275, 1-1. Looked under pressure a ton. Interception, throw / decision looked ugly. It looked forced. It looked completely out of the norm. It's something that I was scratching my head trying to figure out why he had done what he did. James Robinson, 11 for 66 and 1 for 3 and 1 through the air, looked phenomenal in his return from his injury. I think he tore his Achilles, and whenever you tear your Achilles as a running back, it's pretty much you're done for your career. And to see him come out guns a-blazing, and he looked like the true running back 1 for the team. I think this is a guy that's going to win you a lot of your leagues because he costs you like nothing. And to see him utilized over ETN, who only was 4 for 47 and 2 for 18 through the air, I think that's a step in the right direction. However, I do see the team taking a switch to ETN later into the season. So keep that in mind, but enjoy the boom games for now from James Robinson. Kirk Cousins looked phenomenal, 6 for 117. I mean, when they went ahead and acquired him in the offseason, they paid him through the nose, and it really does seem like Trevor Lawrence and him are on the same page. This is a game that they should have won, and the Washington Commanders just came out and secured the win somehow. Carson Wentz had himself a day, 313 yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 picks. I mean, you honestly love to see a quarterback join a new team and then have a 300-plus 4-touchdown game. I think the Washington Commanders are going to be a little overhyped on the performance from Carson Wentz. I think that this was going to be one of the games that you will try to remember when he has his inevitable game where he barely surpasses 100 yards passing. He'll still win the game for you, but it'll be a very grueling process. If you don't know what I'm talking about, he is notorious for having games where he is getting around 100 yards. He even has 2 games in his career where he threw for under 100 yards in the entire game and played the whole game. Unreal. Antonio Gibson, 14 for 58 on the ground and 7 for 72 through the air. He looked great in the absence of Brian Robinson. So Brian Robinson, if you didn't know, had the carjacking, got shot, and so he is recovering. And I should have probably led with the fact that he's recovering. He is recovering and doing fine. He will be back in the season, but for the time being, Antonio Gibson looked great. There was a big threat that Gibson wouldn't even be in the starting rotation for the backs. He was going to be moved to special teams, and then that incident happened, and now Gibson's back as the number 1 running back, and he looked pretty damn good. So keep that in mind. Terry McLaurin, 2 for 58 and 1. If he doesn't score, then we have a very different conversation going on here. But the fact that he did score kind of allows you to just give him a break, given the fact that Jahan Dotson had such a great showing in his debut. 3 for 40 and 2 touchdowns. You really couldn't ask for a better performance from a rookie wide receiver. Okay, so as we get here into the later games, you have the Packers and the Vikings. So these were more of the highlighted games. And man, the Packers at Vikings was a game that I was watching the entire game. I actually went to a friend's house. We were watching it on, man, it was a very, very fun experience. So Aaron Rodgers only threw for 195 yards passing. Without Allen Lazard, the team really looked lost for targets. I'll talk about it here in a second, but Christian Watson, I guess I'll just go ahead and talk about it now. Christian Watson, 2 for 34, and he dropped walk-in touchdown. They were showing a slow-mo video of Aaron Rodgers' face after the drop, and Aaron Rodgers kind of looked at the sideline and was just like, so I think that there's going to be a lot of personality clashing there. It takes a lot to impress Aaron Rodgers, and it takes very little for him to just write you off. So I don't think that it's something that we need to read in too much yet. I think that Christian Watson's definitely a talented wide receiver. I just was a little disappointed to see a guy that they put so much draft capital in to drop a pretty much guaranteed touchdown. Romeo Doubs was 4 for 37. I really liked what I saw out of the guy. He looks athletic. He looks pretty damn good. And it seems like Aaron Rodgers likes him too. For him to be targeting a rookie 4 times in a game, that shows a lot of confidence. Robert Tonyan, I mean, he did catch 3 receptions for 36 yards, which on a day where tight ends really weren't doing too much, you don't hate to see it, but he is coming back from an injury, so be patient with him. I think better days are ahead. Aaron Jones, 5 for 49, 3 for 27. You would have liked to see more from him, but I think that they just saw that A.J. Dillon was being so much more effective that they were just kind of using the hot hand. So he was 10 for 45 and 1 and 5 for 46 through the air. A.J. Dillon looked really, really good. He's one of those backs that is a bruiser and will get the job done every single time. And the fact that the Packers were behind in this game for pretty much the entire game, I think that it just threw them off their rhythm, and that's why they got away from the Aaron Jones game script. Flipping over to the other side of the ball, though, you had Kirk Cousins, 277, 2-0, looked fantastic. He actually looked like he had a lot of time to pass the ball, especially for a defense like Green Bay. Green Bay is being considered like one of the better defenses, and it really didn't seem like it. Jair Alexander looked completely lost guarding Justin Jefferson, if you even want to call it guarding. Dalvin Cook, 2 for 90 on the ground, 3 for 18. I'm pretty impressed with Dalvin Cook, given the fact that he didn't have a Dalvin Cook-esque game. 2 for 90 is not really what you expect. Whenever he has 20 attempts, you think they'd be closer to like 121, 140. And the fact that he only had 90 yards, I wouldn't read too much into it because of the day that Justin Jefferson had, which was 9 for 184 and 2. It was the performance of the day, in my opinion. Justin Jefferson was phenomenal. Such a fun guy to watch. Adam Thielen, 3 for 36. Wasn't really needed in the game. I don't think that we have to read too much into this. Bigger question here is that Irv Smith didn't record a reception. He did drop a target, and he is coming back from a broken thumb, so I don't know. Keep an eye on him. I think that Irv Smith Jr. is a fine tight end, but for the time being, just keep an eye on it. So next up here, you have the Giants and the Titans. So this game shocked the hell out of the entire country. There's really no reason that the Giants, who are probably not going to win more than 6 games this entire year, should upset the number 1 AFC team from last season in that team's home. So I was blown away. Daniel Jones looked efficient, just not effective. He was 17 for 120. He was 17 for 21, 188 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. So he was like doing work. He looked like vintage, Daniel Jones. Saquon Barkley, 18 for 164 and 1. This is the bigger story of this game. Saquon Barkley looked like himself. He had 6 receptions out of the backfield. Saquon Barkley is back in a big way, and I'm very, very excited. This is what you guys have been waiting for. If you held on to him, it's finally time to reap the benefits of that, as long as he's healthy. So take a deep breath and just say a prayer. Sterling Shepard, 2 for 71 and 1. It's just not sustainable. He's coming back from an injury, and it's great to see that he did get some type of work and score, but you got to be careful when you're dealing with a injury-prone player like himself. Ryan Tannehill, 266 and 2 through the air. Derrick Henry, 21 for 82. That looked pretty bad for Derrick Henry, given how Derrick Henry is so good. I just think that Tennessee was a little out of sorts in this game, and I think that there's better days ahead. But Derrick Henry, I would have expected more. It's hard to say that you're disappointed in a running back for getting 82 yards, but this is one of those times where the talent should be succeeding the risk of the defense and the weather conditions, all that kind of stuff. So I'm a little out of sorts here. You got Phillips, who was 6 for 66. I personally don't even know his first name, so it's a player that I'm going to be looking into more. I would have thought that Robert Woods would have been the hyper-targeting person, but it looked like Phillips here is going to be the big guy. Dontrell Hilliard, so he was 3 for 61 and 2 through the air, looked really effective out of the backfield, and that's why I'm also concerned with this Derrick Henry news. Derrick Henry's getting older now. He's coming off an injury. I'm not scared that they're going to like move away from him, but the fact that Dontrell Hilliard had such an effective game in the first game is just not what you need when you have a star player going through a little bit of something. Next up here, we have the Raiders at Chargers. Raiders went ahead and defeated the Chargers 29-24. Derek Carr was pretty impressive in the game from a standpoint of yardage, but overall it was pretty bad, poor, and But overall, it was kind of a bad and poor showing. He got 295 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. The 3 interceptions is very alarming for Derek Carr. It is against a defense that got revamped in the offseason. You have Khalil Mack there now, so I'm sure the added pressure was just consuming him. But that being said, he still managed to get Davante Adams 17 targets. So Davante Adams finished the day with 10 receptions, 141 and 1. He looks phenomenal even without Aaron Rodgers. I think that Fresno State connection with Derek Carr is still there. It's still very much alive, and we're going to see a very, very competitive season out of Davante Adams. Josh Jacobs, he was 10.57, averaging 5.7 a carry, which is great, but behind in the game most of the game, so they just went away from the run and had to try and keep up with a Los Angeles Chargers team who is just going to pass the ball like crazy. They're going to score a lot, and it's going to be really hard to stay in a lot of these games. I think that this is a good indication as to how these AFC West games are going to go. It was a fun game to watch if you had the chance to. Darren Waller, 4 for 79. He looked phenomenal. If he scores, he's probably the best or the second best tight end on the week. Without that, I think he still manages to be the best tight end or the second best tight end of the week, finishing with 79 yards. I think that's a great number to hit, especially since he was dealing with injury throughout the majority of the offseason. And then Hunter Renfrow kind of struggled, man. He only got 3 receptions for 21 yards and was barely targeted in the first half. This is a guy who last season outscored DK Metcalf, which doesn't really take much in the grand scheme of things, but Hunter Renfrow was a phenomenal wide receiver if you picked him up late in your drafts last year. And to see him barely targeted, not getting much work, is kind of alarming a little bit. It is the first game of the season, so don't read too much into it. Justin Herbert, 279, 3-0. That is the type of effort that you wanted to see out of him. You wanted to make sure that he is progressing and continuing to progress in his career. He is probably the second best young quarterback in the league right now behind Josh Allen. Josh Allen is just putting up numbers that are kind of unsustainable for an entire career, but it's really, really fun to watch him play. Austin Eckler, 14 for 36 and 4 for 36 in the air. There's definitely going to be better days ahead. I don't know what happened, but this was a game that I think was pretty much in control the whole time. They were trying out other things. Keenan Allen was actually really, really good until he ended up tweaking his hamstring. He was 4 for 66. So something to monitor there. Hamstrings and wide receivers are not friends. So you have to be sure that he is going to be 100% healthy before he gets the green light. Mike Williams, man, what is going on with Mike Williams? He is 2 for 10 yards. That is absolutely horrible. He got a big amount of money in the offseason, and he's barely getting any receptions. That's just not okay, especially when your number 1 wide receiver, Keenan Allen, goes down. And then Gerald Everett, 3 for 54 and 1. He looked really good in his debut as a Charger. I think that he is going to be a vital component of the Chargers offense. He's just another threat that you have to worry about on that goal line, making the Austin Eckler, the Mike Williams, all those other players around him even better and more threat. Okay, flipping over to the Chiefs at Cardinals game. This was a game that really wasn't close at any point. Chiefs 44, Cardinals 21. Patrick Mahomes just went off. 360 yards, 5 touchdowns. He looked insanely good, especially even without Tyreek Hill. He was still phenomenal. He was hyper-targeting Travis Kelce, and Travis Kelce went off as well, 8 for 121 and 1. That is a huge performance from the tight end. Number 1 tight end on the week by a landslide. All the other tight ends really didn't do much this week, and Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce had that rapport built. I think that is phenomenal. Another wide receiver that really stepped up, in my opinion, was Juju Smith-Schuster. This is a guy who is kind of nursing a knee throughout the offseason. He kept having to get it drained, and then he would play, and then he'd have to get it drained again. So it'd be interesting to see if he needs to get it drained yet again and miss next week. But for the time being, he was 6 for 79. Looks good, looks healthy. MVS 4 for 44. Nothing really out of the ordinary. MVS, even when he was in Green Bay, kind of had that role of being like a streaky guy. But the big name that I really want to talk about here that kind of surprised us quite a bit would be the Clyde Edwards-Helaire. 7 for 42 on the ground, so nothing too special there, but efficient. And then the 3 through 3 for 32 and 2 touchdowns through the air. That's something that we really haven't seen out of Clyde Edwards-Helaire too much, and it's really nice to see that early on in the season. Something to monitor. It's a great start, something you can build off of, and I think that that is a very good sign for Patrick Mahomes, just getting as many options in the absence of Tyreek Hill as possible. Now, on the other side of the ball, you have Kyler Murray, 193, 2, and no interceptions. He just really couldn't get anything going. He was under pressure the entire time. Like, his line was just collapsing. He was having to scramble constantly. The fact that he didn't have any interceptions is actually kind of incredible, given how outmatched they were against Kansas City. James Conner was 10 for 26 and 1 on the ground. He did have a couple of receptions, but that being said, I think that James Conner is one of those guys that is not going to be super efficient through the ground or through the air. He's just one of those guys that has a nose for the end zone and gets the majority of those points. He's going to have games this year where he doesn't score and you're disappointed, but then he's going to have games where he scores 2-3 times and then you're going to feel like you have a true diamond in the rough. Marquise Brown, so 4 for 43 and 1 in his debut game. It was kind of worrisome. So he wasn't really doing much until later in the game. I think through the first half, he maybe had 1 reception, but for the majority of the game, I was just sitting there going like, they talked this up the entire offseason, the Oklahoma connection with Kyler Murray, like what is going on? And I think it was really just a product of how good Kansas City was at keeping pressure on Kyler Murray. So better days ahead. I wouldn't worry about it too much. Zach Ertz, only 2 receptions for 14 yards, but he did manage to score, so that is definitely a plus. He's kind of coming off of his own little calf injury, so something to monitor, but again, brighter days ahead. I think that this was very game script dependent. And then let's go over to the Buccaneers-Cowboys game. So Buccaneers 19, Cowboys 3. This was a putrid game to feature on the Sunday Night Live or the Sunday Night Football. That was just... There was nothing to gain from this context except for maybe that Dak Prescott's going to miss some time with a broken thumb. So let's go ahead and talk about that really quick. Dak Prescott, 14 for 29 for 134, 0, and 1 interception. He got injured. He broke his thumb and will require surgery. He's going to be out for some time. This is a big concerning thing for the entire Dallas offense. I really think that you need to start hitting the panic alarm on this Dallas offense. They don't have that star tackle. And then Ezekiel Elliott, 10 for 52, very efficient on the ground. And then he got 1 pass for -3 yards. I just think it's going to be a really long, grueling season for the Cowboys. And Michael Gallup didn't play, which I think is a good sign. Tony Pollard was 6 for 8 on the ground, 2 through 14 in the air. Again, I think this is just going to be a season-long thing. It really does suck because the defense did a good job of containing that Buccaneers offense. That being said, Tom Brady, 212, 1 and 1. He looked very good coming off of, not showing up to training camp and then just like showing up and playing well. I think that this Dallas defense is going to be doing a lot of really, really good things. Leonard Fournette, 21 for 127. This was the guy of the game. I mean, this guy kept people watching it, in my opinion. He just when he went to the left side, he wasn't really efficient, but when he went to the right side of the field, that's where he was getting a ton of yardage. So Leonard Fournette could have been exposing this Dallas defensive line. Don't really know, but it was a very optimistic thing given how much detail there was and concern about the Buccaneers offensive line losing out their star center, a guard, and I think a tackle as well. So something to monitor. Chris Godwin, 3 for 35. He did tweak his hamstring, so you're going to need to watch out for that, but he was playing phenomenal before that. So I think that Chris Godwin still has it. He is going to come back better than ever, I feel like, as long as they don't rush him back from that hamstring issue. And then Mike Evans, 5 for 71 and 1. This is exactly what you signed up for when you drafted Mike Evans. He's going to get another 1,000-yard receiving season, and then he's also going to score probably close to 10 to 12 times this season. So Mike Evans, great start. I really like this Buccaneers offense. Dallas defense looked great. That's about the only thing that you can glean from this game. And so for our final matchup was the Broncos at the Seahawks. So this was a highly anticipated game as Russell Wilson was returning to the Seahawks stadium. So Russell Wilson, 341 and 0, 29 for 42. Okay, so he looked amazing. He was under pressure a lot and had to scramble quite a bit. But that being said, he did a ton of checkdowns. For the most part, he was finding people in stride. He did have that touchdown to Jerry Jeudy that if he let him a little bit more, it would have been an easy touchdown. Instead, Jerry Jeudy had to come back to the ball. Still managed to score because the guy is lightning fast and an athlete. But Russell Wilson looked really, really good. I'm just disappointed that they weren't able to get the win against a Seahawks team that they really should have, especially when Jamal Adams went down. It just seemed like the Broncos were just going to take control of this game, and it really didn't happen. They fumbled twice in the red zone, and that's a big mistake. So Javonte Williams, he's very fun to watch, had 6.1 per carry, but he only had 7 attempts for 43 yards. He was more effective through the air, though, 11 for 65. He did fumble in the red zone, as mentioned before, but so did his other running back in Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon fumbled in the red zone. He was 12 for 58. Melvin Gordon appears to be the lead back for this team when it comes to a rushing attack, and Javonte is catching a lot of those passes. I'm okay with these numbers from Javonte, given the fact that he has 11 receptions. If you're in a half-point PPR, you're still getting 5.5 points from that game just off of receptions. Full-point PPR, you got 11 points, even though he was not really doing much in that game. Jerry Jeudy, he was pretty much non-existent until the 67-yard touchdown bomb to close out the first half. And I think that really kind of just propelled him for the rest of the game. He managed to secure 3 more targets, finished on the day with 102 and 1. Really good showing. It seems like Cortland Sutton is going to have those boom games as well, given that he caught the same amount of passes of 4. He finished with 72 receiving yards, but just failed to score. So I think it was more of a quiet game for him, but it was nice to see Russell Wilson spreading the ball around, and I think that there are brighter days ahead. So Geno Smith, 23 for 28, 195, 2 and 0. I am very, very surprised. So there was a graphic, if you watch the game, that said that this is Geno Smith's first time starting a game in 8 seasons. Last time he started a season was 2014 with the Jets. So that was really impressive to see him come out. He looked very comfortable. He wasn't really bothered by the pressure, and he really just kind of seemed in control of the game the entire time. I loved how he was, taking safe passes and not trying to force the ball in anywhere. That is a common mistake that you see a lot of these guys make when they are not accustomed to the everyday starting job. Rashad Penny, 12 for 60. I really would have liked to see more out of him. He did have a couple of runs where he broke a couple tackles and then just kind of accelerated. I couldn't tell if he looked like he was banged up or if he was just winded. I'm not really sure. But given the fact that Kenneth Walker was out, I really would have thought that they would have utilized him a little bit more. DK Metcalf, 7 for 36, did not score, but he was amazing out there. I mean, the only problem is that the yardage isn't there yet. Granted, Surtain was covering him the whole game, but even still, DK Metcalf is an anomaly in terms of like human physique. He should be able to just beat whoever's guarding him at any point in time. He's a strong physical guy, and I think the majority of those yards that he lost on that one play, I think he lost like 8 yards on one play. So he should have finished for about 7 and 44. But, I mean, he made a mistake, whatever. Tyler Lockett, 3 for 28. It's a very quiet game, and it's a little something that you need to monitor moving forward. Tyler Lockett is more of that streaky guy, and DK Metcalf is more of that PPR machine. So Tyler Lockett only getting 3 receptions for 28 yards is kind of concerning. It's only one game, so don't read too much into it. But the biggest story out of this game is the amount of tight end utilization from the Seahawks offense. You have Will Dissly, Parkinson, Noah Fant. They combined for 8, 106, and 2. Geno Smith was hyper targeting the tight ends in this game. I really liked what I saw out of Parkinson. It seems like he has a very vital role in this offense. Noah Fant, kind of disappointing, not going to lie, but Will Dissly was superb. So all things being considered, I think it was a very fun game to watch. A little disappointed in the outcome, but that's going to wrap it up. So that's all the games for this week. We have another really, really fun week coming up ahead of us. Go ahead and stick around on the channel and you will see a preview for Thursday Night Football. I'll be dropping that episode on Thursday morning, and then I will be doing this all over again and over again and over again. I'm probably going to be going into a cadence of 4 uploads a week. I'll probably end up dropping a Sunday morning episode to give you start-sit decisions, a Tuesday morning episode to talk about the week worth of football, Thursday preview, and then a Saturday, matchup type thing. So I really am excited about the channel. I think it's taking a really nice shape. Please let me know down in the comments if you liked the graphics for the intros and the outros. But as always, I'll catch you the next one. See you.